Huntress has been Dead by Daylight's most popular killer for years, and there's no doubt why. Her ability to attack survivors from a long distance ensures a tight grip on generators and constant pressure on the survivors. For the past 5 years that she's been in the game, players have been able to master her powers, unlocking great potential from every match. I set out to learn this killer to see how difficult harnessing the Huntress's abilities really are. If you haven't seen my videos before, I'm a survivor main who's exploring the world of playing different killers. I document my authentic experience learning these characters so I can help those of you who want advice from someone freshly experiencing the process. First, I researched the different playstyles of the Huntress and found that there really aren't that many. With such a simple yet effective power, throwing hatchets, really the only way to play her is to compensate for your slow speed by shortening chases with your ranged weapon. The build I decided to start with was Iron Maiden, a perk that allows you to reload hatchets 50% faster, and if you get lucky, survivors who leave a locker will scream and be exposed for 30 seconds, allowing you to instantly put them into the dying state if you hit them with your axe. If you hit them with a hatchet, then it just counts as a normal attack. Next, I went with Darkness Revealed. This allows you to see the auras of any survivor within 8 meters of any locker for 5 seconds whenever you check a locker. As a Huntress, reloading your hatchets is the same as checking a locker, and those 5 seconds start after the reloading animation. This perk has a cooldown of 30 seconds. After that, I put on I'm All Ears. Whenever a survivor fast vaults within 48 meters of you, you see their aura for 6 seconds. This has a cooldown of 40 seconds. Finally, I put on Hex Plaything. There's a lot of rules to this perk, but briefly explained, whenever you hook a survivor for the first time, a Dull Totem becomes a Hex Totem that inflicts them with the Oblivious status effect, meaning that they won't hear your heartbeat, but they can still hear the Huntress singing. So while this doesn't turn you into a stealth killer, you can get the jump on survivors, especially with a good hatchet throw. For add-ons, the Huntress has a lot of great ones, but for this series, I go with either common or uncommon ones, since those are the ones that you could realistically bring into every game. So I'm not going to recommend her best add-ons when normal players probably only have 10 or less of them. Additionally, for my Twins guide, I went with add-ons that affect your speed and cooldown. Then in my Basement Twins video, I commented how I took those add-ons off and Victor felt unusable. So while I don't withdraw my twin add-on recommendations because I genuinely feel like the Toy Sword and Tiny Fingernail are their best add-ons, and you really don't have a reason to use any other ones, pretty much every other killer does have better add-ons that you may want to try, and learning a killer with add-ons that change their speed will mess with your muscle memory. So I'm not saying never use these add-ons, however, it's best to learn a killer with everything at their base speeds, then feel faster with add-ons, instead of learning with faster times and feeling slower when you take them off. So with all that, there aren't a ton of options that fit all that criteria for the Huntress. I ended up going with the Animita Toxin, which induces the blindness status effect for 60 seconds after a hatchet hit, and the Weighted Head, which makes survivors incapacitated for 10 seconds after hatchet hit. The incapacitated status effect means that the survivor can't work on a gen, sabotage a hook, use an item, interact with other survivors, or cleanse a totem. These two add-ons are far from great, but it's something. My first few games went surprisingly well. Throwing hatchets was easy to get the hang of, and I was getting 4Ks, but my main issue definitely was the gens were flying by. While this was partially my fault for not having any gen control perks, the Huntress's slow walking speed made early game especially difficult. By the time I got one person down, a gen or two could have already popped. There were some loops, especially the ones where there's an object like a rock next to a pallet. The survivors would pretty much just run in a circle, and it would be so time consuming since hitboxes make it extremely difficult to throw a hatchet over that rock, and winding up the hatchet will lose you even more time. The best way to approach this I found was to either catch up to the survivor and let them stun you with the pallet, or try to bait the drop. If you throw a hatchet at the same time that they drop a pallet, you're pretty much guaranteed a hit. Very experienced survivors will rarely give you the opportunity though, and they're great at wasting your time on these chases. And as frustrating as it is, playing the Huntress really taught me that I had to sometimes give up on chases or else the consequences would be so much bigger. Now going back to my original build, something that did surprise me was the amount of people who I insta down using Iron Maiden. Especially after the Dredge being released, I thought perks like Inner Strength were dead, but that's far from the case. Even if you can't hit the survivor in 30 seconds, their location being revealed is extremely useful. Now something that disappointed me was Darkness Revealed. It felt like such a perfect perk for the Huntress as one of the killers who need to consistently check lockers. However, its value is completely situational on the map you're on. For example, if you're on Midwich, most of the time I checked a locker, I saw all the survivors' auras, but on other maps, I saw only a few auras for the entire game. The upside to this though is that you can use it a lot, so it isn't a huge deal if you don't get a lot of information every time. But obviously there are perks like Barbecue and Chili where you're guaranteed information at the cost of needing to hook someone. So I think that information perk is good, and you really need to decide for yourself the cost and reward you prefer. Now another perk that I felt like was a hit or miss was I'm All Ears. This definitely did come in clutch sometimes and allowed me to line up the perfect hatchet hits. As you can imagine, there are a lot of loops where seeing the survivor's aura while they don't know where you are is very helpful. The Killer Shack especially was great because you could line up a hatchet at either a door or a window, and that would pretty much be impossible without this perk. Something you also have to remember is the 40-second cooldown. A lot of chases will begin with a survivor vaulting a window or pallet, which will activate the perk, but they're still in your line of sight, so you really don't get any value. So I had a lot of chases where the perk would be on cooldown and an actual useful time for it to activate. This is another perk that I would definitely recommend trying, but I'm also going to tell you, don't be afraid to swap it out. Your playstyle will significantly affect how this perk is utilized, and definitely consider something that may provide either more information or gen control. Speaking of which, as I mentioned earlier, gen rushing was the biggest problem that I faced. While I don't think my initial build was bad, I just didn't have the ability to play aggressively enough to slow survivors enough without the help of any perks. Just as a side note, I did improve on this, but I still would definitely recommend a gen control perk if you're beginning to learn the Huntress. I think that 1 to 2 is pretty essential. So I ended up ditching Hex Plaything. I thought that the undetectable status effect would help me with the aggressive playstyle, but I didn't find much value from it. Even if the survivors were spending time cleansing instead of repairing generators, I just didn't feel like it was giving me ample time to catch up. So at this point I had a dilemma, because the huge update had been announced, but I would know that it'd be around a month until the perk changes actually went live. Not wanting to delay the video until that happens, I dabbled in some perks, but didn't want to fall in love with any that were going to change, because if I learn a perk that's about to be completely different in a month, there's no point. So I went against all the advice I just gave you and used Spies from the Shadows, a perk that gives you a notification whenever a survivor triggers a crow within 36 meters of you with a 5-second cooldown. This perk is so delicious, and let me tell you why. So this is the most consistent information that you're going to get, and while you don't see the aura, you're going to get at least 1 to 3 notifications every minute, which will let you be in a chase for most of the game and enable that pressure that I mentioned earlier. With this being said, I still recommend a gen perk. I haven't played the Huntress since the update came out, but I plan to use Overcharge on her, which when you kick a generator, the regression speed increases from 75% to 200% over the next 30 seconds. And the next survivor to touch the gen will get a difficult skill check and lose 5% progress if they fail. So experienced survivors will probably hit that skill check, but if you're chasing someone and they want to tap the gen to stop their aggression, they're not going to get it. And even after the nerf that took the speed from 400 to 200%, I still think that's probably one of the best gen perks in the game. Then if you aren't vibing with another perk that I recommended, then you should definitely use that extra spot on Call O'Brien. For 60 seconds, this will cause the generator to regress at 200% speed, and this stacks with Overcharge. Additionally, you get to see the generator's aura, and anytime a good skill check is hit on it, then you get a notification. The last change I made was swapping out the weighted head for the leather loop. I don't really know why I didn't do this from the beginning. The incapacitate status effect is pretty useless, and the only benefit that I could find from it was hitting a survivor that was trying to commit to finishing a gen, and that rarely happened. The leather loop, on the other hand, lets you carry a 6 hatchet, which will get you so much more value, and it's uncommon, so you'll get a lot of them. As I continued to play, I didn't notice linear improvement. I would get multiple 4Ks in a row, then get 0 kills for several games. The main difference between the groups, well, it sounds obvious, the hardest survivors to go against were the ones who could consistently dodge hatchets. A lot of survivors run in a straight line or try to zigzag a little, but as long as you line up your hatchet and stay still, you just need to wait for them to be in front of you to hit them. More experienced survivors, though, are able to weave one way as you throw the hatchet. This puts you in a situation where guessing really is your only option. One way that you can avoid this is throwing a hatchet while the survivor is stuck in a vaulting or dropping animation, because this is really the only time that you can guarantee that they won't be able to dodge it. I also just want to tell you that if you're struggling to get the hang of this killer, that's okay and you aren't alone. I got so anxious so many times because it's embarrassing when toxic survivors stun, blind, and body block you for an entire game. My hands would shake so much if I was doing bad since I was desperate to get at least 1 kill. The only thing with Dead by Daylight is that, unless you have friends, but come on, who does? There is no practice mode, so if you're sad that you aren't doing well, the only thing to do is just to get into another game. But I do promise that you will get good at the Huntress. She's just a killer that takes longer to master than others. For example, at about 30 games, I felt great with the twins, and thought about just not doing the last 20. While with the Huntress, I've done 50 games and still don't feel like I can guarantee a 4K most of the time. Anyways, that was a lot of information, but let me tell you the stats of my games. After 50 games, I averaged 2.22 kills, and on average, the survivors completed 4.22 generators. Now looking at the kill distribution, I rarely had an okay game. I pretty much either dominated or flopped. And as I mentioned earlier, the games don't slowly get better. The 4Ks and 0 kills were evenly spread throughout all 50 trials. Now looking at the gens, the stats are much more consistent. The survivors were getting them done. This really proves my point that if you can't stop gen through aggressive play, then you really should bring a perk that can support you, because you'll need it. So with all that, I hope that my trials and tribulations of learning the Huntress can make learning her yourself easier. Thank you for watching, and make sure to snipe those Untitled survivors for me.
That was so powerful.
All right, that's